Here we have a brick and the case-sensitive mini, the Wyvern, for sands and stone, the upcoming WizKids mini-series, giving a desert feel, but there are some other minis in here that can be used elsewhere. So let's take a closer look. Let's start with Crothic the Thunderboar, which some of you may be familiar with if you've run Dragon of Icespire Peak. Now, this is a massive mini here. Let's put a medium-sized mini next to it so you can just get the size here. Look at that. That's massive. And that is not mucus and snot running out of his nose and mouth. It is lightning. This thing is a tremendous mini, and very cool to have, you know, particularly if you are running a campaign setting that has the creature in it, or you could use it as a homebrew creature. Since I pulled this one out, let's look. This is a Priest of Ocbus. It's interesting because he's faceless, which must be, you know, part of the design, because usually the WizKids minis have really detailed faces these days. But great mini for you to play for a cleric or as an NPC or a villain. Here's another Priest of Ocbus. You can see the detailed face on this. Look at those intense eyes in the middle of chanting, and sigils tattooed over her body. In high heels. This is a really cool mini. This strikes me as a villain. I'm not familiar with Ocbus, but she strikes me as a villain. Here we have a beloved and yet feared monster. This is the Rust Monster. And I dare say it's come a long way since those cheap Japanese toys that Gary Gygax used. Look at it, it's got a good face. If you've seen the D&D movie, you've seen a couple of these in action fighting over a scrap of metal. Love to be able to add Rust Monster to my arsenal. Always amazed how small basilisks are. You'd think they would be bigger, but look at the size of the basilisk. But I guess it doesn't have to be huge to be so deadly. I threw them in a game this past Friday night and nearly petrified my players. Here we have a death dog. I like these creatures. I like using them. I did not have an official D&D death dog, and I have to say this is better than the one that I do have, particularly because of that clear base. I mean, look at it. Very cool monster to throw at your players. For those of you who like using lycanthropes, we have a jacked wereboar. It's always cool to have some lycanthropes other than werewolves to throw at your players. This way maybe they don't see it coming. I did not have any UNT brood guards in my collection. This is a really sinister looking character. I like having serpent and snake folk, because one day I'm really going to run my full Thulsa Doom-like campaign where the snake gods are the villains. And this will make a great addition to that campaign. It wouldn't be a desert-themed series without a camel. Is this the first official D&D Camel that's been produced? I believe it is. Even back in the old school Desert of Desolation, they didn't produce a camel. It's certainly the only camel I have. So that makes it pretty cool. Be nice to have a few of these, right? For mounts for your players, or to populate a oasis scene or a desert scene or a city desert scene. This looks like a pile of ooze until you really look close and you can see it's a pile of beetles. It's a swarm of beetles. Glistening black beetles. Does it make you think of the movie The Mummy? Speaking of swarms, we have a swarm of wasps. That, for anybody with a bee phobia, this should terrify your players. Right? Very cool. And I like, this is not delicate. So, I mean, you could toss that around and it would be okay, which I like. Speaking of the mummy, we've got a mummy right here. I think it's obligatory for the mummy to make that kind of pose, like he's lumbering along, reaching out, terrifying your players with the potential of getting mummy rot. But look at the detail with the gold belt. Also, the wrappings coming undone at the foot. This is really quite a good mummy. I like it a lot. Haven't seen hyenas since old school minis. At least I don't have any since old school minis. This is a good sculpt. Great if you're putting some gnolls in your campaign to have some hyenas running with them. But I think it looks really good. Look at the detail in the snarling face. And again, look how you can see through the clear base to what's below. And look, you can see the details. I like that a lot. This little guy may be my favorite. I just love it. I wish I had more of him. There, just so you can see how big he is. He's a flying snake. And I like that mini a lot. Doesn't matter that he's not flying in the air. You can put him up on a little flight stand. I mean, snakes slither, so he's prepping to fly, but just what a cool little mini. You need, half a dozen of those. Surprise your players. And speaking of snakes, we've got a Medusa here. This is unlike any of the builds we've previously seen. I mean, this one would be a great mid-level big bad evil genius, right? I really like it. Look, can you see the face? Look at the detail on those horrible eyes. The eyes that glow and petrify the characters as they journey through the dungeon of the Medusa. Love this one. Who can see this Nagra without thinking of Skitsy from the Dark Crystal? Not I. I can't wait to use this mini. This is going to be like the second in command, the evil counselor, for a villain. How cool. Like, look, it's got this skull staff, a humped back, just a sinister character waiting to be developed. I only have old school bullets, or bullets, or land sharks, but I really like this, how it's burrowing up out of the ground, because that's what they do. These creatures burrow and surprise their victims. I really like that WizKids did it emerging from the earth. They did the same thing with their Ankeg, and I love it. Perfect. But like, look at the detail on the arms, or legs rather. The large claws for excavating. And that killer whale-like maw opening to inflict tremendous damage upon its victims. I don't know if I'm going to say it right. A Dimetrodon. It's a dinosaur. I don't know if you like using dinosaurs in your campaign, but I don't believe this one had been made before, so it's a nice addition. To me, it reminds me of the old Flash Gordon serial movies where they would put a crest, on an iguana and make it look like a giant lizard foe. Speaking of dinosaurs, we have another one, a Pteranodon. I didn't have a Pteranodon, so this one is very cool to have and add. And I like that it's included in the desert series. You can see this thing flying around and attacking your players. You probably want to double, triple, and quadruple up on this mini. This is like a piece of set dressing, or maybe it's a monster. I haven't used it. It's violet fungus, and it's really cool. It reminds me of like an alien seed pod. I see this having a lot of versatility and could be used again and again for different purposes. This is a Lamia with a stern expression and a different pose, laying down this time. I don't often use these, and I feel like we get a lot of them in D&D and Pathfinder miniseries. So this is a cool mini if you don't have one. I was less excited about it because I think, when they're making their choices about what minis to put out, I feel like this one could have been set aside maybe for something new that we haven't seen. Now, that being said, like, this is, again, a different design than we've seen, so provides some variation, and I like variation. Now, we've seen a lot of Harpies, but I have to tell you, I'm always happy to get new Harpies and more Harpies, because Harpies are never monsters I throw at singularly. I put up a lot of Harpies when throwing them at my players. I just like a swarm of Harpies coming in. Some stay circling above using their song while the others come in and attack. I just like that a lot. And this is another great Harpy mini. I really like the pose. I like the flying pose. And I really like these sturdy flying bases that they've been using for the past few miniseries. I forget if we've seen the regular vulture for D&D or Pathfinder. It doesn't really matter. A lot of people who play D&D use Pathfinder minis, and a lot of people who play Pathfinder use D&D minis. But this is a large vulture. Kind of reminds me of Eon from the Rudolph Shiny New Year special. If you've seen that, I may be dating myself. Here's a Naga. Again, you've got some variation from Nagas we've previously seen. You could also use this if you don't have a giant snake as a giant snake. But again, this is another one where I was like, we've seen a number of Nagas before. I feel like we didn't need a new one. However, what I do like about this one is if you need a handful of giant snakes, or maybe you don't have a giant snake, this absolutely could be used for one. So it's actually, whether you're using a Naga or you need a giant snake, I think this is a really useful mini and I like it. I guess it wouldn't be a desert-themed series without a Degen. And this is another one I feel like we've seen a lot of. So this is another repeat. How often do you use these in your games? I will say this, out of the ones that they've made, I like this one the best. Like, it's got that lamp like from I Dream of Genie or Aladdin. And I think this, if I was going to use the Degen in my game, this is the one I'd use. I have others. and others that WizKids have made, but this is the one I'd use. So I do like this mini, but I do feel like we could have had another mini in its place. Here we have an Ifrit, and what I like about him, rather than other versions, is that he really reminds me of the cover from the Dungeons Master's Guide for AD&D. And I have used Ifrits in my game, and I'm more likely to use this one because this one reminds me of really what an Ifrit should look like, or at least, you know, in my memory, how I always saw them depicted. So I like this one a lot. Here's a dust mephit. Now, we've seen mephits in the past, certainly with the old school D&D ones, but this one, like he's got a dust cloud below him, like he's swirling across the battlefield, kicking up dust, generating dust. He is dust. But look at his face. I really like that they've captured, you know, the way they look in the D&D artwork. Now, I could use a dozen of these. I love the Crothic, and I really like this better than the old school D&D ones, which made them look metallic. So the 5th edition version and the WizKids version make them look more like these chitinous reptilian creatures that they are. They're a burrowing creature, makes sense for the desert, but I use them anywhere. In fact, the other night, my players were nearly TPK'd when they stumbled upon a lair of Crothics. We have a Galebdur. This is a rocky elemental creature, and I'll tell you what, even as a solo brute, I think this guy has a challenge rating 5 or something like that. They're pretty hefty to throw at a low-level group, or maybe you have a horde of them fighting against your higher-level group, or maybe they're loaded up in catapults and hurled over the walls of a castle to wreak havoc inside. But what a cool mini this one is. And last but not least, the Wyvern. Let's put a mini in so you can see how it compares. This would be absolutely terrifying for your players. I mean, it's got its poisonous stinger, a mouthful of sharp teeth. Look at that. Look at the scales. So it'll blend in with a desertous, rocky climb. Like you've got wings, a little ravaged maybe from battles. So this is, you can see that inner circle, considered a large mini, and now because you can see through with the clear base, you can see how it fits in 4 squares. But you could also use this as a huge mini, as it takes up the 9 squares. So here you have a little preview of some of the minis from Sand and Stone. I love that they're doing themed versions, you know, environments. Next up is Seas and Shores. And I hope they continue that, because it allows you to have an arsenal of creatures fit for certain environments, but then a lot of times versatile and can be used in other environments. And they slip some all-around minis in there as well. So I hope you enjoyed this preview. If you do, like, share, and subscribe. But you can also find out more about these on the links below and pre-order, or you can wait and order them from your favorite mom and pop shop. Till next time, take care.